Live from a grungy kitchen table located in Annapolis, Maryland's scenic and historic capital, it's the Maryland Crabs Podcast. With each episode, your hosts, Tim Hamilton, John Fernay, and the occasional guest will dive in and pick apart the stuff that really matters most to you. We're too lazy to actually solve any of these problems, but we can definitely stir the pot. From schools, politics, parking in the fire lane, to those horrible people who drive BMWs. And here with this week's episode, live from the kitchen table, Tim Hamilton and John Fernay.
Hey, we're back. This is the Maryland Crabs. This is the new podcast in Annapolis, and this is John Fernay.
And Tim Hamilton. We are back.
Yeah, and last week we covered a bunch of stuff about Labor Day, starting school after Labor Day. We talked about the Airbnb. Mm-hmm. We're learning the ways of podcasting, what buttons to push.
Yeah, record is very important.
Mm-hmm.
So if you do a whole podcast and you don't hit record,
it doesn't work out. It tends to be very boring and non-compelling.
We call that the practice run.
we just had one of those a few minutes ago. Mm-hmm. But yes, we are back. And a lot has happened actually in the last couple of weeks. We've got our website up and running, themarylandcrabs.com. We've got accepted at iTunes, so yay for us.
Yeah.
We are on Twitter, Facebook, Soundcloud, soon to be YouTube. We're still working on that just because it's Google and all that, and we just don't like Google.
So if you want to look for us on Facebook, you're going to find us at the Maryland Crabs. We have a page and we have a group. So the page, we're kind of doing a test to see which one is the best way to communicate with everybody. And so far, everyone's been active on the group. But join the group, and when you're there, you can post a comment. You can post an idea of what you want to see us cover, what we covered and ticked you off, what we kind of bungled, what words John mispronounces. And you can reach us by email at info@themarylandcrabs.com for the same stuff if you don't want to be public about it. And you can find us at Twitter at the Maryland Crabs Podcast. That's the MD.
No, you screw this up all the time.
No.
Yeah, Twitter. It's at MD Crabs Podcast.
I don't need your criticism, John.
Okay, well, get over it. Okay, we need to move on. It's at MD Crabs Podcast.
You kids and your disco and your Twitter and your... But that's where you can find us. So we're all over the place. And when you download our podcast at iTunes, please be generous and leave some ratings and a comment, because with their algorithms, more people will be able to see it when they search. So that's very, very important. So give us a few ratings and a few comments, and we'd really appreciate it. And for that effort, you get absolutely nothing.
Well, you might get something. I'll talk to you about that a little bit later. I had an idea.
But
yeah, no. And if you want to leave us a comment, send us an email too. We'll look at all the emails. May not answer them, as Tim said, but we'll definitely look at them. So if you've got something to say or to mouth off, suggestion?
info@themarylandcrabs.com.
That will do it.
And I will check that religiously every few weeks.
Yeah. Like everyone needs another email account. How was your wrap at lunch today?
So we went to Grump's, and I got a buffalo chicken wrap and good fries.
I had their club sandwich. It was awesome.
Man. That was huge.
Grump's is nice. Grump's is right around the corner. It's nice. Not many places you can wear your pajamas to lunch.
And just they're great. And we're not saying that because they're sponsoring, because they're not. But we're just saying because they kind of sponsor because we just dined and dashed. We didn't pay, so. We just feel we offered it. We should give them a shout out for that.
Yeah. Well, hey Duncan, if you want to sponsor, just let us know. Well, we're not above selling ourselves. Yeah. Hey, what we wanted to talk about this week is crime in Annapolis, and there's this big discussion because there's been some serious shit that's gone down in the last couple of weeks, both in community housing, public housing, in some of the areas that you wouldn't expect it, getting some lip service from the politicians and the powers that be, and a lot of people are upset.
Here's the issue, and I was thinking about this, is that it's said often that Annapolis has the highest proportion of public housing in the country, and I think that's actually not true. It's not far off, but we just have a very high proportion of public housing. But the issue is that public housing is interspersed within the middle class neighborhoods. So the two socioeconomic classes, the issues, they kind of bump up against each other. And I think you can see that when you're on Facebook and you go to the Eastport Neighborhood Forum, which is probably the most active forum in town. I think they have almost 4,000 people who are on there, and it's throughout the day it's updated. But you hear it every day. I don't think a day goes by where I don't hear someone asking if anyone's heard gunshots, because They're right by Harbor House, which is one of the larger public housing in the area. And Eastport's been gentrified over the past 40 years, so I think there's also the African American pockets that have disappeared, so there's a lot of resentment there, which I kind of get. I grew up in Bethesda, and when I go back to visit my mother, the neighborhood I grew up in has completely disappeared.
Well, there are a number of communities in Annapolis that have done that. You look at Cars Beach, down off of Edgewood Road.
Well, we're in Rundle on the Bay right now. That's my neighborhood, and that is 50-50, probably African American, white, and it was traditionally a black neighborhood for years. It was an enclave for wealthy African Americans from D.C., and this was their beach. And
right.
And I'm here now, and you don't get much whiter than me.
And that's it. Well, one of the things that sort of interested me is that Chief Pristu, the police chief for Annapolis City Police Department, has said time and time again that crime is on its way down in Annapolis. The numbers are there, but from what I'm seeing, it's not. And the rapes are up considerably. Murders, we've got 8 murders so far in the
But in
city.
all fairness, you can have one murder, and that increases your percentage dramatically, because we have I think maybe 5 or 6 a year.
Okay, well, then to put that into perspective, the next murder that happens this year, and we've still got 4 more months, right? Yeah, 3 or 4 more months of the year to deal with. It will have surpassed all murders from 2011 till 2015.
All right, so that's not just the proportion. That's just not a proportionality issue. That's statistically, that's pretty big.
Yeah, the rapes are going up there, and they've also.
But let's go back a second. And I don't know this. I'm just thinking out loud. Have all those shootings, all those murders happened in public housing?
No.
In HACA properties?
No, not necessarily.
No.
There's some that are in subsidized housing. There's some that are in HACA properties. There's some that are off.
And people tend to lump the subsidized housing into HACA, even though, like, for example, Bay Ridge Gardens, if you're on Bay Ridge and Forest,
right,
going downtown,
right,
people think, and that's that's Ben's Road,
Ben's Drive,
and
yeah.
which I've seen. I see drug activity there all the time in the middle of the day when you go by. You can see it. They're standing there.
Right.
But that's not public housing. That's private.
That's Section 8 privately managed housing there. How well it's managed is a different story. But what I did, I took a look at some of the crime statistics from the city. Actually, the Annapolis City Managers has a report monthly. He's a little bit behind on the times there, so Tom, you better get with it. But at annapolis.gov and under administration, you can go to City Manager's office. And the chief is correct in total number of crimes that they've reported. The number is down, but that's not a good number to look at either. Property crimes this year is also down, so they've had fewer break-ins, they've had fewer vehicle thefts. However, the violent crimes, aggravated assault, robbery with armed robbery without a weapon, murders and rapes are all up, and they're all up fairly significantly.
We haven't had any I watch city council as you do, and I'm watching where I haven't seen any reduction in the police department budget. I haven't seen any layoffs. Are we missing officers?
No. They're a little bit short on staffing. They've got some people that are out on, leave, medical leave, and vacations and stuff like that they have.
How many officers do we have total?
Right now we've got I forget what the number is. I don't have the number.
It's like 160 something, isn't it?
It's something like that.
Those officers, or is that total staffing? It seems like a lot for a town this size.
Sworn officers is what I looked at. Actually, I looked at some ratios this morning. There's sworn officers in Annapolis. There's 1 officer for every 296 residents in Annapolis.
What? Wait, say it again.
One officer for every 296 residents.
All right, so 1 per 300.
1 per 300. To put that in perspective, New York City, with a population of 8 million, has 1 for every 247. Now, granted, they've got a huge daytime population that comes into work in the city.
Right.
That's not living.
Oh, true. Commuters from the bridge and tunnel people.
Baltimore is 1 in 201, which is the lowest one that I was able to look at. Now, most of our police officers and our chief are cast-offs from Baltimore, and I don't say that in a mean way, but
we've inherited
them,
and we'll talk about that in a second too.
Baltimore County is 1 for every 451. Anne Arundel County is 1 for 772.
So we do have a high percentage. We have a very high percentage ratio of police to in a very small geographic area too.
Los Angeles City, 1 for every 431. So what it is, we've got a very small geographic area. You've got the Naval Academy, which is self-sustaining. We also have subsidiary police forces, it's probably not the right term for it, but we've got a Maryland State Police Barracks right here in Annapolis. We've got
The Capitol Police.
We've got the Capitol Police that do the state buildings. There's U.S. Government Police, which is what DSA, GGS, that handle the Naval Academy, and they do assist the city with other things as well. So we are pretty well staffed as far as that goes. But the chief has actually, in a city council meeting, they talked about adding additional officers, and the chief said that while he wouldn't refuse an additional officer if the city said, hey, here's 5 cops, can you use them? He would. But he doesn't feel that there is a need for them, which I thought was very interesting.
So all right, so we have more police proportionally than most cities. We're looking at large municipalities, of course.
Sure.
We're not. I mean, maybe that is apples to oranges a little bit. So we're like I guess if we looked at like Frederick or Cumberland or other similarly sized.
Well,
towns.
what's interesting too is that you've got to find the cities that actually have separate city police forces.
Right.
And
yeah.
And I've said for a number of years, I said I think it would be great, and I know none of the Annapolis city cops are going to say this, but to turn around and merge that in with the county.
I agree.
Because we are surrounded by the county on all sides.
Well, and that's the thing too, is that I think you have to look at, this has always been what I've talked about when you look at the size of city government, which is sprawlingly huge. Mm-hmm. Annapolis city government is huge. It's like 630 some full-time employees, which is ridiculous when compared to others. And people have said, well, it's the size, we're the state capital and we have need. All right.
Blah, 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 blah.
But I will say, when you look at those raw numbers, it looks bad. But when you look at the fact that we have a couple things that cities our size don't have, like our own police department, our own fire department, and our own Department of Transportation, if you took those out, maybe we'd be pretty much on par. Maybe it's the fact that the city isn't overstaffed per se, but it's just that we have departments that other cities our size don't have.
I mean, I think there's some things to be gained by merging the ones. For instance, this morning I was going off to the studio at WRNR at 5 o'clock in the morning, and there was 2 black guys walking down the sidewalk at 5 o'clock in the morning. It was suspicious. I mean, I don't see anybody except for a rare
racist
dog walker. No, it's not. It's that's what it was. And that was the first question when I called it in. Were they black or were they white? And I called the number directly to the police department because I know that number. If I called 911, it would have been a delay again because 911 is handled. When you dial 911 on the phone company, it goes up to the county.
Right.
And then the county has to determine where you are and route it back down to the police department to the number that I called directly. And that's a loss of time when, time is of the essence, especially when you don't know as a caller exactly where you are.
Plus, we have a unique situation here in that if you look at the Forest Drive corridor especially, it's city up to the 7-Eleven and the old CNC Liquors right in front of Giant.
Right.
But we have a situation where you have parts of the county, which would be Hillsmere and Bay Ridge and Arundel on the Bay and Fishing Creek, et cetera, that are all separated from the rest of the county by the city. Right. So we're I don't want to say we're a stepchild because everyone says we're a stepchild, but when you look at police, we're probably not. I don't see the police down here often, except for the occasional speed trap. But I don't see them patrolling down here.
Okay, like if you're down on Bay Ridge Avenue in front of Powell Park,
right,
and you call up and say, "Hey, I'm on Bay Ridge Avenue from the county," they're going to have to determine whether that's Bay Ridge Avenue in the county or the city, because as soon as you hit the 7-Eleven down there at Edgewood Road, that turns into the city,
right,
and then it turns back into the county when it turns into Forest, but it's the city as it continues into Annapolis, down in front of the SPCA and everything else. So there's some differences, some problems there in response. And I think that by merging the police force, and I think the fire department as well, we could gain an awful lot from that. But that's something that's,
And it takes that budget. Well, I don't know. I mean, this is where I think,
I don't know that we would save that much money. Certainly we could, have some attrition in employees, maybe some early retirements or something along those lines.
Well, the problem too is whenever we do anything departmentally, whenever we spin anything out, like for example, the parking, we absorb those employees who were in the employee instead of turning them out to the third party, the turnkey company. See, there's no savings because you keep those employees. You're
still paying it just a different way.
Yeah, for example, like if you do trash pickup and then you did the parking, the employees who worked for the city, they're given the option to stay with the city. Well, if there's no position, I mean, you're still carrying that
just changing who's signing the paycheck at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. But you're not realizing the savings that you would be saving. But I mean, I think it would be different with the police department because that's pretty huge.
Yeah. No. Another thing, back to Chief Pristoup's thing with the crime, the FBI also changed the way they report crime. and again, I hate when people change the way, because it totally skews things. The city turned around and did a new kind of budgeting. Except for the line item budget, they did like project budgeting. I can't remember exactly what the term is. It's not on the top of my thing, but way back when, if you were a spouse or a domestic partner, and you beat your partner, that wasn't considered an assault. But now it is.
No, it's like intramural. Yeah.
Right. So it goes back and forth this era, and again.
And for a while there, I think wasn't there? And I think about this like 5 years ago. Wasn't the city excluding the crime that was occurring on HACA properties?
Yes.
So I mean that's key. I mean, and let's be honest. I mean, the HACA properties, you're going to have a high proportion amount of crime. So as you take that out, holy shit, you look better on the books.
Well, you look at, I mean, HACA and
I don't know if they're still doing that.
No, they're not. But take the whole public housing element out of that. I mean, HACA is going to have more crime. Period. It's the highest density population in the city, and it doesn't matter. I mean, if you're, it's okay. Some of the Hunt Meadows probably going to have some of the lowest crime, I would think, in the city, just because they are quarter, half acre lots or whatever they are back there. And some of the houses that are back on the creek back there.
Right, and they're set apart from the rest of the city by a significant. I mean, they're a mile back along a
right.
Ideally,
but then you turn around, Watergate Apartments. Okay, again, not a bad place, but a higher density. So you're going to have vandalism to cars. You're going to have some of this petty crime. You're probably going to have some serious crime that goes on there. And as the more the denser it gets, the more crime, and that's just to be expected. And you would think that that's where they would turn around and focus their energies on that. Sometimes I wonder whether the police really are concerned about solving things, and that's I'll speak from personal experience. I got broken into twice last year, and I really got the feeling that the police didn't care. It was just fill out the paperwork and whatnot and move on.
Let's take a step back. So we're looking at we have ample manpower, it would seem, just on paper. So we're looking good. So why are we having this spike of crime? Is it allocation of resources at that point?
I think the spike in crime, and I will agree with every police chief in the world is sitting there saying that it's just the abundance of heroin and drugs. People are looking to feed it. I mean, we look at the heroin deaths in the city, countywide, and everything else to see where they are, where they're coming from, and it's just it's out of control, and people are looking to feed their habit, and I think that's where it's coming from.
Oh, but then wouldn't it be countywide? I mean, is the spike in crime, violent crime in Annapolis, is that mirroring the city and the county and the state? Because if it was, then fine. Then we can say, yeah, this is an epidemic that's
unique to the city.
Yeah. So I don't know. And there as everything. I mean, Annapolis is unique. Well, not unique. I mean, I put that in with several other cities, but we have a racial component to everything that happens in the city, and there's nothing that doesn't have a racial component to. And Carl Snowden, everyone knows Carl as a community activist.
Right.
He's very
pot stirrer.
Yeah, he's very and I disagree with him almost always, 95% of the time. As but I mean, again, suburban white guy, I'm not seeing a perspective that's there. But we're looking at crime as two middle class white guys who live in relatively nice neighborhoods, even though you've been broken into a couple times, but. Right. But we're going to have a different perspective than someone who lives in Harbor House or Newtown 20 or Bywater. So, Carl, I want to read part of his Facebook update, which was shared many times. So I'm not telling tales out of school. And his status, his profile is public. It's Carl Snowden. This is from September 7th. Tick-tock. He's the highest paid city official in Annapolis, Maryland, making $153,000 a year. Last weekend marked the 8th homicide in the city of Annapolis, and what has been the response of Chief Michael Pristoop? He's called for more cameras in public housing neighborhoods. He's talked about residents providing more support to the police department by providing tips. What has been missing is a thorough review of what is happening in the Annapolis Police Department. The U.S. Department of Justice blasted the Baltimore City Department for its culture of corruption. So this is where he makes his connection. In a scathing report, the U.S. Justice Department pointed out that a, quote, culture, quote, developed where police officers routinely violated the civil rights of African Americans. What does this have to do with the city of Annapolis, you ask? Under Chief Pristoop, more than 20 Baltimore police officers have been hired, including the brother of former Baltimore police commissioner, who has been charged with discrimination himself. According to the published reports, he escaped sanctions by being hired by Chief Pristoop, who himself is a former member of the Baltimore City Police Department. Alderwoman Sheila Finlayson, chairman who oversees the Public Safety Committee, has not held a public hearing regarding the number of police transferred from Baltimore and what effect, if any, this has had on police-community relations. It is time for the community to be made aware of the shenanigans that have been occurring within the police department. That makes it sound cute. Like, shenanigans is just cute.
Yeah.
A white police officer alters an arrest warrant and is found guilty by a judge for doing so, and that officer is promoted. Another white female Annapolis police officer files a false police report, and she too is later promoted. A white Annapolis police officer is charged with sexual harassing a female officer and is found guilty and later named Officer of the Month. Recently, a black alderman spoke to a white police officer, so that'd be Kenny Kirby. Recently, a black alderman spoke to a white police officer at Annapolis Police Department who refused to speak to him in front of witnesses. Let's look at what's happened to black police officers. The late detective Shelley White, who alleged racial discrimination in the Annapolis Police Department when he died suddenly, neither the mayor, police chief, or the city attorney attended his funeral. In his defense, the mayor doesn't attend anything. So let's be honest. The Anne Arundel County Police Department provided an honor guard for the funeral of the late Annapolis detective. Former Annapolis police officer Jason Thomas has been subjected to disparate treatment. While others may be unwilling to speak up or speak out, I assure you that I am not. I am well aware that the Annapolis Police Department, like other law enforcement agencies, monitor Facebook postings. A little paranoia, but...
They do.
Okay, well we're paranoid, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're pretty okay. This public posting, they may hear about it within a matter of minutes, and I know that every incident that I have cited is true. Now we'll see whether the elected officials who are responsible for the Annapolis Police Department will do their jobs, or if they will have been doing what they have been doing for too long, nothing. Dropping the mic, information is power, justice is indivisible, truth is revealing.
A luta
continua, which is Portuguese for let the struggle continue. Which, by the way, if he has to translate that every time, just use the translation.
Right.
It just seems.
The struggle continues.
All right. So, again, Carl can be paranoid. Carl can be a pot stirrer. But Carl is not always wrong. And he's probably more right than I give him credit for. Do you think... And so we're talking about crime, the way the police address crime within, particularly HACA, within there. Do you think there's any truth to this? I mean,
I do think. I mean, there's...
But it's guilt by association. Like, this is where I don't like lazy reasoning, and the lazy reasoning is that the Justice Department found that there's a culture of discrimination in Baltimore. We have police officers who are from Baltimore, ergo, we have a culture of corruption in Annapolis.
I don't think it's necessarily that's necessarily the problem. I think that what Carl says factually is true, but I think he's only getting one side of the story. And I'm not saying that the police are without blame here. I'm not saying the police are right or that Carl's right, but I mean, we don't have the other side of the story. There's a lot of confidential information that goes back and forth in any kind of these personnel things, as well as also in the courts, that Carl does not necessarily know. He's got the story of the harmed victim, if you will. This Detective Shelley White, who, unfortunately he's passed away now, but I mean, he was discriminated against. And this other black officer that was not promoted, the other white officer that was promoted, was there any kind of mitigating circumstances? I don't know. There could be, there could not be, but I don't believe Carl is privy to that. So it is somewhat of a one-sided discussion, but I think it's worthy of one to be had. And it has some questions. It brings up questions that need to be answered. And I don't see anybody on the city really looking to do that. I know the Caucus of Black Caucus of Business Leaders. Oh, I can't remember the name of the group that Carl heads. Came in and they looked at the police force and they said, "Hey, these are the changes that we want to see." They presented to City Council. They presented to the police.
Which was what?
Oh, they talked about body cameras and they talked about cameras in the cruisers and whatnot.
I'm fine with all that. I think that's fair.
And there were some other things, and it was having an independent party to be able to review some personnel issues, complaints, citizen complaints, and have an independent non-police agency or panel.
Well, all right. So tell me now. So if someone has an issue with the police, someone has a dust up with they feel they were treated unfairly. How does that play out?
From what I understand, you go to the city police department, and they investigate it.
They investigate themselves.
They investigate themselves, which is typically never very good. There's a gentleman that I talked to in town that's actually very vocal on Reddit.
Oh yeah, he is.
And he was accosted by the police department.
White guy, too.
Yeah,
What's that?
white guy.
White guy about 30.
He was stopped at night for potentially stealing a cell phone up by Stan and Joe's. Was stopped on the Eastport Bridge about 5 minutes later, so it would have been really difficult to get that far in that way. And the police were harassing him. They actually showed me some bruises that he had and some scrapes on his body that where he was manhandled, if you will, by the police for this because he started to record this incident.
Which is his right to do.
Which is his right to
but
do.
But that also can tend to aggravate a situation.
Which it does. And what happened is this happened right in the middle of where two cameras are on the bridge. And
out of view. So he's he's in the blind spot.
Right. And now it's me against the cops. And he went and he reported it. He reported an assault by an officer. And they pretty much said, yeah, no. Now, that wasn't an official one. And I mean, for whatever reason, he didn't go the official file the formal complaint and whatnot. It's just because he realized or he felt that they were just going to cast him off.
So what Carl wants is he wants an independent citizen body or at least governmental body that's removed from the police department.
From the police department. And
I think that's reasonable.
I do too. And you had set him up with a separate email or a separate way to report something, an issue, and then you get into it. But you've got to give the police have to give that committee or those people the access to the records and to everything that they need. Which sort of brings me to another point that I've got, as far as the crime in HACA and everything else that they were looking to bring in.
It's my mom.
Cameras. It's your mom on the phone? Put her on. We don't have the technology just yet. Pretty soon.
Actually, it was Citibank because I have half the country opening up credit cards.
Was that Rachel?
My name. That's Rachel.
Rachel
Card
from
Services. Rachel. She's got a crush on Rachel.
Yeah, well, is your wife know?
Well, Rachel calls me a lot. My wife never calls. So that's...
But yeah, I mean, the body cameras, the city has expanded their camera repertoire. They've got 200 and some odd cameras across the city, but they don't have the staff to watch them. They've got one person. They want to hire some person. Right now they float people into shifts, but I mean, how does one person monitor 200 cameras?
Does it records everything though, right?
Well, it does, but one thing they had...
That's a lot of data.
That's exactly at the cost of storing that data. And then also keeping the chain of evidence is, how long do you have to have that for? Do you have to, if there's a crime that happens today, it gets solved 6 months from now, you've got to have that video from today. So, I mean, how far back do you keep the video?
Well, and that's a practical side because this leads into something else that's kind of related to the cameras, is that at one point, let's say that we don't have the personnel to monitor the cameras, but we do have the technology. We have the cameras in place. So just getting the personnel to watch that's kind of an important thing. But I feel that you can't win. I will defend the chief on this. You can't win for losing, because whenever you offer a solution or at least a tool to fight crime, you criticize if it doesn't go far enough, or and I'll give an example. I understand that in a budgetary discussion that among the alderpersons that it was suggested that the Latinos have a
liaison
for the city, which makes sense to me because you have a language barrier and they're relative newcomers. And then there was an offer to budget more money for police to patrol HACA. And from what I understand is that some of the African American alderpersons were a little upset because they thought that was indicative of they get a positive tool, which is a liaison, and we get a negative tool, which is someone to clamp down on the African American community. So they budgeted the money and got an African American liaison who I think has got 20 hours a week, something like that,
right.
And he was a great guy, by the way.
Yeah.
But then all of a sudden, a month later, 6 weeks later, you had this explosion in crime, and people were upset. And then you had alderperson Rhonda Pindell Charles, penned that letter to the editor, or that column in the Capitol, where she was lambasting the fact that there wasn't a police present. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, you had that chance and you turned that down. So I feel you look at here with, you had an opportunity, you had tools to start protecting some of the people in public housing, the vast majority who are law-abiding citizens,
and you didn't take it.
And they didn't take it, and all of a sudden, but then you're complaining that you don't have the tools that you were offered just a few weeks before. And I feel the same way with what Carl has in his Facebook post, which is, okay, yeah, it's still an issue and there's still a lot to be done, but cameras, even though we can't use them, that's a start. And I'll be honest with you, if we had cameras in my community right now, I would not be upset about it. And I'm a privacy freak.
Sure. I
That's-
agree. I don't have a problem. There was a study done in the UK probably 20 years ago at this point.
Which is, I think, London is the most monitored city in the world.
Well, it was way back then. And what they did is they followed a woman throughout her day. And then they retraced her steps. And aside from being in her flat, being in the bathroom at work, she was totally on camera. It was something crazy, like 17 hours.
Right.
It was down in the hallway in her apartment building, in the elevator, out the lobby, on the street, into the little Starbucks, into the entrance to her office. As she's working in her cubicle, down in the hallway, into the bathroom, no camera. Come out of the bathroom, the rest of the day, into the nightclub, into the whole 9 yards. And it was amazing at how much time we're on camera. And
that was 20 years ago.
And we were on camera a lot here in Annapolis. I mean, you see all the time. I mean, I know at True Value Hardware. I mean, I know that Jared has sent me pictures saying, "Hey, this guy was caught shoplifting. Can you see what you can do?"
Because it's so cheap now. These cameras are cheap. The technology, and it comes down to storage, like you said. But I mean, we're looking at I guess the greater question is, we said, so we have all these tools. We've got more than enough police officers, it would seem, if we look at the numbers. We have cameras in place. I don't hear anyone complaining that we don't have any of the equipment that we need. So what's the problem?
I think
then it comes down. Look, I think you look at whether it's either incompetence or it's conspiracy. That's why. I mean, I know there's something in between that, but is it the fact that, I mean, I guess we look at Chief Pristoop, and I've heard a lot of criticism, and I'm pulling a Trump right now. I'm hearing people say, but I mean, it's
huge.
It's huge. But I mean, what is the issue? We should not have this problem. We this town is very small. We have all the resources, it would seem.
Are we policing like Baltimore? Are we policing Mayberry like it's Baltimore? I don't know. Maybe.
Well, Baltimore is a disaster. I don't even think. I mean,
well, no. I'm just saying that are we bringing the culture from Baltimore and policing Annapolis as if it is a small little Baltimore?
Well, let's look at it this way too. So here's what I was thinking. I was talking to you about this last week. That I read about a great program, and I'm not a big believer in the feel good programs because I think that there's not a practical side to them. So I'm not a big believer in that. But I look at what some cities are doing, which is the PAL, which we have PAL here, but it's not the same. But it's the Police Athletic League, and what they found were in high crime areas that there was a chasm between the police and the residents. That there was a lack of trust, and so what happened is that I think it was in St. Louis or somewhere else where you had a couple cops said, "Hey, we're going to start a football team for the kids." So they said, "Okay, we're going to open up registration and it's free," and no one joined. So they went door to door. They cajoled the grandmothers. They finally got like...
That's where you go.
The grandmothers.
Grandmothers.
So they finally got 5 or 6 kids, and then a couple more joined. And then by the end of the season, they scraped their way to like 11 or 12, which is the minimum. But they said that in that neighborhood, because they were beat cops, the crime actually fell because the cops knew the kids, and the kids knew the cops, and the cops knew about the kids' lives and what was involved. And the next year, they had several other teams. So my point with that is that you had police officers who were invested in the community. Are we at a point, like, I know that most of the police officers, and I can hear Alderperson Finlayson screaming in my head right now, that the cost of living in Annapolis is so high that it prevents this. And she's right. But is there a point where we don't have any police officers who are invested in the community? They come here, they punch in, they do their job, and they go like out to Frederick or Baltimore County or where, I mean, because they come from pretty far, from what I understand.
Most of them do live out of the city.
Out of the city.
There's a few that live in the city, and I think you're correct. I think community policing is huge, and everything I've read about it is a success.
And it's not feel good. There's a practical side to that because they get to know the individuals. There's such a culture of silence in public housing that across the country. No snitching is a big thing. But if you know this cop and this cop knows him, he can pull him aside and go, "All right, I want to talk to you one-on-one." What kind of information?
There's a rapport there.
Exactly.
Well, I'll tell you, as far as the football team, you're saying the city is actually trying to start up a basketball league, encouraging the fathers, mostly in public housing and whatnot, but fathers all over the city, to come together and work on an inter-community basketball league. And this is something that was started way back when. It failed after about a year and a half, and Alderwoman Rondell Pendell Charles is restarting that again, along with the blessing of the mayor and the police department and everything else. So hopefully that's a way to do it. But I believe that community policing is a start. But I think community policing is a way to do this. You see cops. Okay, when I called those people that were suspicious, I saw two cops responding to
in
it.
your neighborhood,
Right.
And we got to point out your house has been hit like twice.
Right. And I mean, we've had probably
And you back up against Annapolis or Bay Ridge Gardens.
Bay Ridge Gardens, not immediately, but close enough. And you know what happens is when I was going to work, I saw two cop cars responding, presumably down to my call. They had their lights on, no sirens. But again, they were coming from way out of my area. But I'm thinking, why can't the police put cops in a specific ward? We've got 8 wards in the city, and have them get to know that. You know, maybe they drive around one night, and the next night they walk around. Maybe the next night they ride a bike, just to get to know who the neighbors are, and the neighbors get to know who the cop. Hey, it's it's Andy from Mayberry, or it's Barney.
And I don't have any statistics, so I'm going to just do what I always do: is just make a sweeping generalization from something I might have read on Reddit one day. But isn't it that in wherever you have beat cops, where they're on feet, that crime actually show a significant decrease in crime for that exact reason? Because they get to know the communities. They're not just rolling through, separated by windows and just glaring at each other through the glass.
No, I'll tell you. Who would be the most effective crime fighter? Would be my damn postman. Give him a gun and a badge. I mean, the guy knows who's here, who's not, who belongs in the neighborhood.
My mailman would be awesome at it too, because he's not delivering my mail correctly. So he might as well do something.
But yeah, no, I mean, it's a beat cop, a neighborhood policing would get to know who the neighborhoods are. Hey, okay, it's all of a sudden there's a strange car parked in my driveway. Oh yeah, that's his girlfriend. I recognize that car. Or, well, I've never seen that car. Maybe I just run the plate on that.
Well, But then I go back to kind of defending the chief, because when you take these sort of this sort of approach, that you can kind of ride the razor's edge on that one, where the first thing they'll say is, we don't have police presence, and no one cares about public housing. But then when you do have a police presence, they're saying we're an occupied neighborhood, that the cops are always harassing, and so I just don't know how you find that sweet spot.
It's difficult. It's not, and I don't have a solution for it. I wish I did. I know that they've it's the NET program that the city has taken with the gunfire that erupted in Eastport a couple months ago with the 30 some odd shots in the middle of the night. They have had officers in public housing, mostly Harbor House and Eastport Terrace, spending a lot of their time, an inordinate amount of their time, patrolling that. But these guys, I've been through there, and I go through there after I come back from the rec center, and I see them sitting in their car. And I mean, they're not out interacting with the community. They're sitting at a stop sign, parked, chit-chatting, or doing a crossword. I don't know what they're doing, but they're in the car. Sometimes I've just seen the car parked there with no officer, and hopefully they're out patrolling. I don't know whether they are or whether they just park a car there to give it a presence. And the crooks know what the schedule is too.
Why do we see a police car in front of Bay Ridge Spirits all the time?
They hire them for security. Bay Ridge Wine and Spirits. They hire. It's within the city limits, because that shopping center is kind of one of those funky carved out parts of the city.
Right.
But they do hire an off-duty police officer to provide security for the store.
With a city cruiser?
Yeah, some of our city cops that live in the city do have take-home cruisers.
Huh.
And I mean, I don't have a problem with that.
All right. I just always wondered.
I would love to have a cop living next door to me and bring his cruiser home and park it in the driveway. It would give everybody pause before they kick in my front door again.
So we're looking at. So I don't think we solved anything or even cracked anything, because we have a spike in crime, and I don't know how you can explain that. We can say that. I mean, it's been significant. I mean, even though we live in a city where one murder or one rape or not assault, but I mean any major huge crime is going to significantly affect your statistics. Sure. But what we're seeing here is something above and beyond that, where we do see a significant uptick in crime. Now it's over 1 year, so this could be an anomaly for some reason. What caused it? It's either something on the back end in a socioeconomic situation. And I don't, because heroin's a gradual thing. I mean, why would it spike this year?
It's doubled over 2015 in the county, in the state.
And I believe everything's a management problem. If you go to Starbucks and your coffee's crap, or something, it's not the employee's fault; it's the manager's fault. So it's either that this is a situation that has sprung organically from a cause that we don't know, or it's the fact that there's a mismanagement, there's a misallocation of resources. I think that's all what it comes down to. And I think, let's be honest, when you talk about Annapolis, you're talking about, for the most part, African American neighborhoods, which tend to be HACA. I mean, we live in a middle class neighborhood where we have middle class African American and middle class white people, so we're kind of an anomaly in Annapolis. But the white people in Annapolis don't care until it infringes upon their neighborhood. And when you look at Eastport and watch the Eastport Forum, they're upset, and they should be upset. But you have two communities that are just on top of each other, and it's affecting both of them. And I will say this too, because I read the Capitol. If you read the comments after the Capitol, I comment on that sometimes, much to my own chagrin. But when you had a very large turnout on City Council on Monday night of the residents of public housing.
So what are you going to do about the crime?
And they were pleading for help. They were. And some of the comments I saw were kind of typical. People who I'm guessing, by the way, live on Broadneck and Serena Park, don't live in the city, just from their previous posts. But they did that typical, well, why don't you tell them to stop killing each other? The same way whenever you see Black Lives Matter, and I'm not taking a stand either way, but you hear on Fox News going, well, there's all this violence in Chicago with blacks killing blacks and they don't care. I think that's disingenuous, because you look at those people who were in City Council the other night. They weren't people who are waving guns around. They're not the people who are doing. No. I mean, you think what you want about people who live in public housing, but most of them, the vast majority of them, follow the law. You know, they're part of our city. They're citizens. You know that. I mean, you can be as conservative you want and say you want to get rid of public housing, but those people don't deserve to live in shit. I mean, if you're living in public housing, let's be honest, it's not good.
No, it's shit.
It's not. I mean, the conditions where you live. I mean, you can say, all right, they're living off the taxpayer. You know, they're not living comfortable lives. It's a lousy way to live.
Yeah, they're not.
You know, so at the very least, can't we just look at? I mean, are they treating? I always said, and this is always I mean, you and I argued about 2 years ago about the youths in Bywater, and there was some youth crime, and it was black youths, and so they didn't know who they were, so the police came in and took their pictures.
Right.
And Robert Eads lost his shit, and he should have, in my opinion. And you and I didn't agree on this, because you said, well, you know, they're allowed. You don't have a presumption of privacy and public, and they can take pictures. And my point was, no, they were pulling these kids out, and they were taking their pictures, and the kids are not going to resist a request from the police. And this is my acid test. What if you had done that at St. Mary's? That if you'd parked on Duke of Gloucester, the police said, hey, we had a couple white kids, we don't know who they are, and started pulling students over and taking their picture. The big SUVs with little fleur-de-lis on it, those women would lose their shit.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, so I look the same way with crime. Is that we have crime in Ward 1 that's ancillary to drunks, I think, for the most part.
Sure.
We had a couple of mysterious sexual assaults that the city was very quiet about, and you couldn't get information on. Right. But if we had the problem that we have in public housing in Ward 1, it would be taken care of overnight. You'd see a huge police presence, and I don't think that's racism. I mean, I don't think it's blatant racism. I think that it's a fact that you have a neighborhood of powerful people that happen to be white.
You've got a squeaky wheel,
right? And let's say that HACA was a trailer park with mostly white people. Would they get consideration against Ward 1? No, they wouldn't. I think it's socioeconomic. Yeah. And Carl Snowden would argue with me. Maybe Sheila would, and certainly Robert Eads would, and maybe they'd be right. But as I see it, you just see. But how do you fix the problem?
Well, when you talk about allocating the resources, Newtown 20 is the scene of the latest murder in the city.
And Newtown 20 is right behind the Lido Pizza on Forest Drive, the new Soul.
Right, the old CVS and Evolve Medical Clinics.
Wait, old CVS? They closed?
No, I say the old one, meaning that as opposed to the new one right down here on Forest Drive. But they've now hired security guards at a cost of $4,000 a week, and they're hoping to expand it to other HACA properties, but they don't have the money for it.
$4,000 a week. So let's do quick math. That's $16,000 a year or a month.
This is two guards, and I'm not sure whether they are on two shifts or two guards on the same shift, but it's only 12 hours a day. It's 11 to 11.
So we just
and I'm like, and they publish it in the paper, so it's like, well, okay, so when are we going to do shit up in Newtown 20?
All right, so Newtown 20.
Let's do it 11:30 at night. No,
Public housing. So they hired. It sounds reactionary. They hired they hired a private company who provides them with two
armed guards.
Armed guards who presumably has power of arrest of some sort or citizen's
power
arrest.
To detain. They don't have any kind of
like same as in a mall.
Yes, yes. Only they carry guns.
So you have two of them at a cost of $4,000 a week. And so $2,000. You're not paying two security guards $2,000 a week. So they're making a nice profit on this. Whoever they hired, which is their right to do it. Right.
Well, extrapolate this. Okay, you take the cost of that at $16,000 a month. It's what, like $260,000 a year or something like that. we can hire the entry-level cop in Annapolis is making about 52. Now I know there's benefits that are involved and everything else there at that, but we could probably staff a single cop 24/7 in that community for less money. When you add in benefits, maybe a little bit more than what we're going to pay in private security. Now,
that's if you want to hire an extra cop. I mean, I'm of the mind too. And again, this is where I think anyone who knows what they're talking about would just laugh at me. But I mean, they're right. But I mean, can you not just reallocate a resource? I mean, we have like 6 or 7 public housing, probably only 4 which are problems for the most part. Because I've never heard any issues at Bloomsbury Square, for example. Right. But if you had just one cop allocated there that you're already paying,
yep.
I mean.
I think you could do it. The issue there is funding and where it comes from. HACA is paying for the private security guards, and they don't have the money for it. That's a separate budget. They get their money from the feds.
And that's a big issue, too, because they were found for mismanaging.
Misusing the $500,000.
And I don't think there was anything insidious behind it. I think it was just bungled. Sounds like
stupidity. Yeah, and ignorance. And I don't mean that as stupid. I mean, I just mean they were ignorant of the law or ignorant of how they had to how to fund it. But and HACA has come out right and said, hey, well, if this guard program works, we do need to find ways to expand it and pay for it. We don't have it.
If it works, sure.
And somebody is going to have to help us. Well, that somebody is the city. And to be honest with you, I think just the way the crime has spiked, and regardless of what Chief Pristoop says on the numbers, I mean, you talk to Jessica Packler, who lives across from HACA. You talk to any of these other people that are impacted and affected by the shootings and the murders and the police presence and the drug dealing and everything else. If it makes our city better, I would be willing to pay more taxes. I'd be willing to pay a fee. Maybe they throw in a HACA fee or something like that.
I think you're in the minority, though. I mean, if you're living in Eastport, I think you'd be willing to because it affects you. But if you're living in Ward 1, you're going to say, I mean, you don't see it as a problem.
I know. No, Ward 1 says, no. You probably ought to hire another Christmas wreath taker downer.
Or, I want
another snow shoveler.
The bricks are going the wrong way we don't like the way the bricks are going on the sidewalk. Change that again. Unless it impacts you, I think that's the problem. And at some point, we've been talking about, we really want to get someone like Robert Eads, who we're both pretty much fans of. And I think everyone knows him from watching the city council. But, I want to get him in here to give us. I'll tell you, I had to drop someone off years ago who I was working with, and I had to drop them off at Bywater, and we had been working late. And he goes, "Can you give me a lift?" And sure, I'll drive. I'm a white guy, so I drove him into Bywater at 1:30 in the morning in July, and I didn't know this existed in the city. Like it was 2 different worlds. I rolled in, and it was. The place was alive, like it was noon on a Saturday. It was kids. It was
vibrant.
It was vibrant. It was just vibrant's probably. I mean, it was, to me, but I was just I come from a sleepy neighborhood. I pull up and everyone's asleep. You go in there at 1 a.m. in July, and it was, there was couches on the sidewalks, and everyone was talking, and it was just total. It just reminded me that there are worlds in Annapolis, as small as we are, that if you're a middle-class white guy or even a middle-class black guy,
they're worlds apart.
You're worlds apart, and you just don't. You think you have an understanding, you don't. You and I have seen some YouTube videos lately of a couple of activists, young guys, who are commenting. I think one might be Carl's son, right?
Well, there's a relative of Carl's that is doing it, and
it's very interesting. They're doing YouTube channels where they're talking about Annapolis from the black perspective. And it stunned me because, and it shouldn't. I mean, this is how naive I am. But there were just things that we don't think about. And there's a guy, I think he's running for alderman, or he plans on it, who grew up in Harbor House, and he's probably late 20s, early 30s.
Right. He's out of it now. He's up in Baltimore, so he may be moving back. But I think the elections will be something. I mean, I think if a good move to keep the crime on the forefront would be for the Ward 6, the HACA communities, maybe it's the black communities, maybe it's the poor communities, maybe it's just the people that are impacted by the crime, whatever, just people that are tired of it, to keep up the pressure on this crime thing. Come next election, I think it can make a difference. You get somebody in there that's really sharp and wants to work for Ward 6, which is primarily all of the, public housing with the exception of Bloomsbury Square. it could make a world of difference.
It could, but I mean, I think if you're a Democrat who's running for mayor, and we don't know who that's going to be yet.
Yeah, we do. It's Gavin.
Well, yeah, Gavin. So, but it's Gavin
Buckley.
Buckley, yeah, he owns Metropolitan and
Tsunami and Lemongrass.
and by default, he seems to be the candidate. No one's come out yet. We hear a lot of rumbling. But can you be a Democratic candidate and take on the police union? I'm not saying that there's an acrimonious relationship, but I'm saying that this is a sensitive issue for the police union. I think, if any of them heard us talking right now, they'd be very upset at our lack of perspective. That they may be right to an extent, but then there's another side to it that first of all, I'm not a fan of public service unions anyway. Mm-hmm. Because I think I'm not anti-union. I think if you work for Walmart or you're a trucker, or if you work in a job where there's a danger or a safety issue, yeah,
there's a place for it.
But a union is supposed to protect you against the or supposed to take an adversarial relationship with the employer. And what if your employer is the taxpayer? And
Mm-hmm.
and what if you are taking an adversarial relationship with, or you're taking a adversarial relationship with the people who control your budgets and who are your employers? That to me is a big issue. Yeah. But I mean that notwithstanding, can you be a Democratic? I mean, they're going to have a problem. Like if you say, "Hey, can you reallocate your resources?" and they'll say, "No, we're doing fine." That's. I don't know if any Democratic candidate can really take a contrary position or can really. What we're trying to say is impact crime, because the status quo, I think, for the police department is fine. They're going to say this is a spike in crime because of heroin, but they would never say, well, it's maybe because we're not allocating our resources in a manner that is conducive to reducing crime.
No, they're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. Well, I mean, it'd be interesting. I mean, you talk about different perspectives and stuff like that, and I would love to get a hold of Robert Eads and sit down and talk with him. And I think it's valuable to talk to Michael Pristoop, Chief Michael Pristoop, right, as well, and perhaps a politician, perhaps the mayor. I mean, we're coming into an election season next year.
Well, I'll go this far. When do you think, and I'm not criticizing Mayor Panelides, because I would say the same about most of his predecessors too. When was the last time the mayors have ever gone into public housing and talked to anyone there?
When he demanded that they succumb to the city inspections for rental.
Uh-huh. He went into the...
It was more of a photo op than anything else, but he went in with...
And again, I'm not... Again, he's... I mean, the only time I've ever seen any Democrats in public housing who weren't representing them was right before the election.
Right before the election. No, you're right. And I want to give Mayor Mike Panelides credit, because, I mean, he came in and he said he was going to get rid of Carl Snowden out of the HACA board. He tried.
He got outmaneuvered.
He tried, but he got snookered. He turned around and he said he was going to appoint people that he wanted on the HACA board, and he's got 2 people on the HACA board that he wanted. He said he wanted to get inspections of the buildings.
Yeah, he did everything he said.
And he got inspections of the building, much to their resistance. They're like, hey, we don't have the money for this. We can't do this.
Yeah, but and that's what gets me too. Is that you can't win for losing. Is he's a Republican who came in and public housing has been ignored except for around election time, right, by the Democrats.
Right.
And he came in and he said, and people are, and they are living in shitholes. If you've ever driven through there,
mm-hmm,
it's not good.
No.
And he's one, and so it's a safety issue. Whereas I think Mr. Eads saw that as the first move in the elimination of public housing, which may be paranoia. He may be half right, where maybe there's a move towards privatization.
There may be some truth into that. I mean, there's a gentleman that's in, and I don't know who it is, but it's running a blog. I can't remember the name of it, but
it'll be the show notes.
We'll put it up there. It's a very inflammatory blog, primarily about Eastport, and his position is that you raise all sorts of public housing, build affordable housing in this place, and sort of let the cards fall where they may. And I disagree with that.
Well, Fox, the Fox brothers, who owns
Chris and Andrew.
Was it Chris Fox who ran for president? Or president.
For president. that was Chris Fox.
Yeah. For mayor.
As an independent.
So Chris Fox, he ran last two elections ago.
2 elections
as an independent, and the Fox. There's like 9,000 Fox brothers, and they all own restaurants, and they're great businessmen in town. But his one of his campaign promises was that he was going to eliminate public housing. Now, I don't know if that's I don't think it's reasonable to do that. I mean, it's sort of like when you look at Trump saying, yeah, you're going to deport 11 million people.
Right,
the same way you're going to eliminate 2,000, the home for 2,000 people in town. It's just not happening. But I think what they talked about is not raising these buildings, and then I think what they're talking about is probably privatization.
I know the word you're in. They're big. Multiple syllables, Tim. Yeah. You have a ton. Privatization?
Yeah, we open another
Is
beer.
that the word?
But I mean, that's the model. But then you have private security. Then you have, and then it's on them. I mean, I think at that point. But then if you look at the Bay Ridge Gardens, I mean, the crime that comes out there anecdotally. I mean, for years they were coming out and they were robbing the Shell and then disappearing right back in there. If you pass right there right now, it's we're recording this and it's 2:30 in the afternoon. If you go right now on Ben's Drive, you're going to see guys in that breezeway
and they're dealing
drugs.
They're dealing drugs.
You can see it right now. I mean, no one's addressing it. And let's talk about this too. You have an open air drug market over on Clay Street.
Yep.
Everyone knows this and it's a running gag. If you know that, and it's a street that's 2 blocks long, it shouldn't. I mean, you know where to go. It's not a big mystery. It's not like it's Anacostia and it's a sprawlingly huge urban decay. We're talking about
5 square miles.
Yeah, that's a city. So we know where the trouble spots are in the city. I mean, there's only a handful of them. Why can't that be addressed? I think that's a fair question.
Yeah,
we know what the issues are. We know where the place. We have all the resources. I think I'm kind of going more towards incompetence at this point. It's inexcusable.
So put your resources where the problem is.
Right now, I mean, again, if we had Chief Pristoop, and we're gonna try and do that, but if he might say, all right, you're an idiot, and here's why. And I'm usually an idiot. And
yeah,
but I mean,
we're used to that.
Yeah. So, but I mean, to me, it seems pretty simple. I mean, if we were in the Bronx or if we were in D.C. or Baltimore, those are huge geographic areas, and the urban decay goes for miles. Here, it's very small, very contained. So it seems like it shouldn't be a problem, especially, I mean, if we had a lack of resources, and I think everyone is always going to say that they do. If you go to any department and say, do you have everything you need? No one's going to go, yep, we're good. They're all going to say, well, we can't because of it. But I mean, according to your numbers that you have, on the surface, it looks like we're okay. When it comes, maybe the employees, maybe they'll say, well, we don't have as many police officers, we have back staff, and they're not on the streets, and but.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers that I talked about earlier were pretty much sworn officers. And so that could be patrol officers as well as detectives and whatnot, but that's that. So, but what we'll do is let's see if we can get a hold of Chief Pristoop.
Yep.
For the next time, and we'll see if we can get a hold of Robert Eads and maybe sit down and have a conversation with them and see what they can bring to the table and tell us whether we're full of it or not.
Yeah, I think so. And I also I want to look at some of the residents from Eastport and just kind of how it impacts. I want to get our perspective as the two middle-aged white guys, living in the suburbs, and I want to see the people it affects, both in Eastport and the people who are making the decisions. But moving forward, we're gonna start to introduce some more elements to the podcast. We're gonna look at some more interviews, of course, and we're gonna do a couple of on location, recorded live, and we're gonna let you know when that happens. Yeah. But again. And we'll be covering more Annapolis, and we're going to be spreading out over the next few podcasts. Right now, we're going to be going every 2 weeks, but I think we're going to move that up to a weekly schedule relatively soon. We've been able to work into the schedule, so it's doable. So we record on Thursdays, and we're going to have it uploaded probably Thursday afternoon.
Right.
So we're going to make it as timely as we can.
As accessible for you.
Exactly. So don't forget to follow us on Facebook.
Hey, wait a minute. Can I put a plug in for myself first?
Make sure. You have shellfish?
Yeah, my shellfish. Hey, check us out. Check me out. Not me, but check out the morning show on WRNR 1031. All Annapolis, which is a Facebook page, and eyeonannapolis.net is what I do for my main gig when I'm not sitting here across the kitchen table talking to you.
And I just make snarky comments on my Facebook page, so I don't have anything.
That's right. Hey, are you Yeah, no, I'm not going to go there. I'm not going to go there. Hey, do you and what I've got actually through Eye on Annapolis, I've got a couple gift cards.
Oh. So what are we going to do?
Let's give away some.
All right, let's do it. How are we going to do it?
Contact us. Find out. Get on any way we want. Whether the Facebook page.
Or the page of the group. So that's the Maryland Crabs on Facebook, on the page and the group. Join both.
Right.
Email at info@themarylandcrabs.com and Twitter at MD Crabs Podcast.
Yes, you finally got it.
Finally nailed that.
Just follow somewhere along there. Leave a comment. Say, hey, give me a gift card or something like that. We'll pick out probably half a dozen for a $25 gift card. It'll be either to Union Jacks or to Metropolitan.
Right. So to be clear, find us on Twitter at MD Crabs Podcast, or go to our Facebook page or our Facebook group and just say, give me a
gift card.
Give me a gift card.
Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but if you say that, we'll consider it.
Exactly. So again, Facebook, Twitter, email, and then on it's critically important, if you would, is on iTunes is the comments and the ratings. That really helps us out. And tell a friend.
Yep.
And that's my mom.
5-star rating. She's getting impatient.
I know.
Time to go.
Give her a gift card.
Say goodbye, Tim.
Goodbye, Tim.
Goodbye.
This has been the Maryland Crabs Podcast with Tim Hamilton and John Fernay. Sure to follow them in all the regular places, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and online at themarylandcrabs.com. Take a moment to rate us on iTunes. Now, get the hell out of my kitchen. Seriously, go!
You're still here? It's over. Go home. Go.